the module on confounding and bias, this is the lecture segment for information bias. So again, there's a lot of different terms that you might hear about the way data are collected in a study. Diagnostic suspicion bias, surveillance bias, classification bias, recall bias. But I would just group all these together and call them information bias. So again, we had selection bias, which is who are the participants in your study about whom you have data. Information bias, you have those participants. What data do you have? What is the quality of those variables that you have measured about those study participants? So we say that information bias is the result of measurement error or misclassification. So I'm just going to parenthetically mention that measurement to me as an epidemiologist is any piece of data for the study, whether it's the answer to an interview question, a lab assay result, a disease diagnosis. We're just measuring all this stuff. We're trying to capture this information. We say that we're measuring it. Okay. And then misclassification is often measurement error in a categorical variable. We've misclassified exposed as non-exposed. And using those two categories, we talk about misclassification. So sources of measurement error. So imagine that there's the true value of some factor, whether it's exposure, disease, or confounder. There is a truth, okay? But then the truth is subject to random variation and biological variation. So the classic example that people use is, blood pressure. People are walking around going through their day, their blood pressure is changing, depending on their activities. They come into the doctor's office and they're stressed, their blood pressure changes. So that's still sort of random variation around the truth, right? That's biological variation and random variation. And then the moment that you choose to measure it is really the best you can do, right? So there's a true value of that factor at the point that you're going to measure it. But that is affected by the performance of the instrument and the observer, how the results are recorded, how the results are computed. And that finally is going to end up providing for you the value of that variable used in the study. So random variation, statistically, you just have to account for that and be aware of it. But at the point that you're measuring it, the performance of the instrument and the observer, the quality of your study design, the attention that you've paid to testing out your methods before you scale them up, all of that is also going to affect the quality of your data and the value of the variables you use in the study. So in epidemiology, we talk about both validity and reliability of a measurement. So it's actually possible so the ideal is the upper left here. You want your measurements to be both valid and reliable. So if the bullseye is the truth, okay, the bullseye is the gold standard or the true biological value. If you have a way of measuring it where all of your measurements, so all those smaller dots are, the shots are your attempts to measure this truth. If they're all circled right around the bullseye, that means, the average value of all your measurements equals the truth. And it also means that any individual measurement did not deviate very far from the truth. So that's both valid and reliable, and that's awesome. So at the upper right, you may have a measurement that is very reliable. So see, all those shots are grouped very closely together. So when you repeat the measurement or use the same measurement method on different subjects, you're always getting, your measurement is reliable in terms of it being repeatable. All those shots are landing very close together. And that's actually a desirable characteristic. Even if, as shown in the upper right, all of the average of all those measurements is not actually hitting the bullseye, it's still hitting they're still hitting the same spot reliably, so that if you use the same method across all of your study participants, you're going to expect the error to be very similar. So we would call that actually a measurement with low validity because it's not hitting the bullseye. But high reliability, it's reproducible. So reproducibility is very desirable, even in a not perfectly valid measurement. Okay, and then on the lower left, we have a bunch of shots that do average around the bullseye, right? If you averaged out all those measurements, you would hit the bullseye. You'd be